If you ask me, water isn't scary. I mean, it's literally one of the safest substances you can put in your body. But sometimes, water can act in ways that makes you never want to touch a glass of it ever again. From creepily consuming massive blocks of concrete or somehow glowing in the dark, to breaking the laws of physics, it's time to put our water wings on and check out some of the weirdest, strangest, and most dangerous water phenomena in the world. Man, I hope my Speedos still fit. Tinkling tree. I know that plants don't have feelings, but I'm sure this mulberry tree feels pretty embarrassed after some sicko took a video of him taking a leak. This is the gushing water tree in the village of Dinosa, Montenegro, a spectacular shrub that became a local landmark and viral sensation thanks to its waterfall impersonation. A self-watering plant is every gardener's dream. However, as disturbingly dreamlike as it seems, this tree isn't an endless water source. It turns out the entire village is fed by a natural spring, the area containing multiple freshwater streams that run both above and below the ground. During periods of heavy rain, or when the winter snow melts in summer, the water level rises, causing the spring to overflow into channels that run underneath the gushing water tree. The tree actually has a hollow trunk, and the pressure from the flooding spring causes the water to run up inside the tree until the trunk is full. As we all know, when you gotta go, you gotta go. So when the tree can't hold it any longer, the water from the spring will burst through a hole in its trunk, creating a magical and slightly embarrassing effect. Hey, at least the underground channel didn't turn the water yellow. Dangerous waters. When it comes to types of ice, everyone has their favorites. Mine has always been split between cubed, dry, or vanilla, until now. These sharp shards of ice won't improve your soda, but they look awesome covering small ponds around the world in strange geometric patterns. Now, this type of ice formation only occurs in very specific conditions because of the way ice forms. Water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, but in order to become ice, water molecules need to organize themselves around impurities, also known as nuclei, in order to crystallize. But when there are relatively few nuclei in the water, and no wind to jostle the molecule's structure, when the temperature drops below zero, huge ice grains can begin to form. As their slowly expanding freezing pattern meets others, the ice grains are shaped into these jagged geometric formations that look like a geometry teacher's dream. And while this pattern looks amazing when it's stationary, seeing a rolling sea of shards is a little more unsettling. This is Lake Sildir, a giant lake in Turkey that completely ices over in winter. The pointy surface ice forms when temperatures begin to rise in the spring, and the thick layer of ice on the surface starts to melt and soften. At this point, some pieces will melt completely, while other thicker sheets of ice will simply break, snapping apart into multiple shards. The newly melted water will then push the broken shards of ice against each other, causing them to stack on top of one another and gradually slide their way to the shore. The resulting waves of ice shards look pretty incredible, but you might want to wait until they melt before you go for a swim at Lake Sildir. I don't recommend trying to dive into them. Scientific slushie. Slushies have been fueling kids, cinema-goers, and gas station clerks for years. The biggest Slurpees you can usually get come in 44-ounce cups. But if you're a true fan of the ice-cold drink, you should head to Canada, a magical land where entire lakes are filled with slushie. Although a lake-flavored slushie doesn't sound that tasty, visually, this big drink is definitely big enough to satisfy Slurpee lovers all over the world. The science behind this lake-sized slushie is incredibly simple, and it's all because this is a saltwater lake. You see, salt lowers the freezing point of water, meaning that salt water can drop to incredibly cold temperatures before freezing solid, and before freezing entirely, The salt water will partially freeze, with extreme weather conditions churning it up into the slushy substance. Eventually, the lake will either completely freeze over or melt back into water. But just for a moment, the slushy lake becomes a reality. H2O. From one piece of ice to another. Wait, what? I could have sworn that water was just frozen. No, despite how it looks, this running water wasn't frozen in time, and the Redditor that filmed the clip isn't a sorcerer. This insane illusion is called laminar flow, and it occurs thanks to a neat bit of physics. Usually, when you turn a faucet on, the water comes out in a turbulent path, meaning that all the water bursting out is moving in a slightly different direction. As the fluid flows at different angles, the water particles crash into each other, causing the liquid to become slightly frothy as it mixes. This can occur for a few different reasons. For example, if the end of the faucet is asymmetrical or slightly worn, it will bump the water around when it exits, causing the turbulent flow. Laminar flow occurs when a fluid travels in a smooth, streamlined path, with all of the liquid flowing out at a constant rate and following the exact same route. This uniform speed and path means that there's no turbulence at all, making it impossible to see any movement within the flow. This generally occurs when liquid is flowing through a perfectly smooth and symmetrical hole. For example, if you fill a balloon with water and create a small hole with a sharp object, the hole will have no real imperfections, so the resulting water flow will almost always be laminar. Wow, that looks utterly flawless. Flowless. Whirlpools. When it comes to water phenomena, few are more famous or feared than whirlpools. These terrifying twisters are made of rotating currents of water that form through suction or opposing currents, resulting in a characteristic vortex that channels anything in those currents down. The term whirlpool covers everything from the suction at the end of an unplugged bath to the Moskstraumen off the Norwegian coast, a gigantic system of whirlpools that grow up to 160 feet wide, spinning with enough force to drag objects to the bottom of the ocean. The whirlpools have terrified sailors for centuries. However, they're not always scary. Sometimes they can look a little magical, but when you're also that close to one, in a boat no less, they're undoubtedly scary. Back in 2021, a couple from Astoria, Oregon were driving back home when they came across a whirlpool spinning around in a lake beside the road. The pair pulled over to take a better look and obviously throw some stuff into it to see how strong its currents were. After throwing a few sticks and reeds into the whirlpool, they came across an incredible discovery. The whirlpool was actually a portal, because whatever they threw into it was teleported to another body of water on the other side of the road. The couple uploaded the footage of the portal onto TikTok, and the videos soon went viral, as netizens tried to figure out what was causing the phenomenon. The theories covered everything from portal guns to witchcraft. However, a few weeks later, the couple finally figured it out when they returned to the whirlpool during low tide. It turns out the whirlpool was caused by two large culverts, giant pipes that were sucking the water and debris to the other side of the road to prevent it from flooding. The fact that the illusion was caused by pipes instead of the paranormal was kind of disappointing. But luckily, it isn't the only magical whirlpool that's gone viral. Springtime in Latvia brings lots of floods, and the spring of 2013 saw some of the worst flooding the country had seen in over 100 years. During this time, Janis Astix was walking through a village called Dviet when he came across an unbelievably monstrous whirlpool inside a river, slowly consuming everything around it. Janis watched as the whirlpool ate logs, concrete, and chunks of ice in mere minutes. And I thought I had a big appetite. The whirlpool looks like a draining bathtub, and it actually works in a similar way. The water and debris in the video is being sucked into an inlet at the bottom of the river, and once the debris is sucked down, it's pulled through an underground channel before popping out in a separate stream running nearby. From the surface, this whirlpool looks absolutely terrifying. But it turns out it's just a big, dangerous underwater water slide. Sounds pretty fun, if you like drowning. Space-age surfing. Everybody loves a trip to the beach, but this nightmare swim turned freaky when beachgoers found themselves walking, swimming, and surfing on seawater that glowed in the dark. The water looks like something out of a sci-fi film, and believe it or not, the video was filmed on the alien planet of Los Angeles, California. Hey, if you've ever been to LA, you'll know how out of this world it can be. The ocean in LA started to display these crazy colors back in 2020. However, the world is full of beaches with bioluminescent water. Oceans all over the world can turn bright blue when a boat, person, or wave disturbs them. And it turns out this phenomenon isn't just caused by the water itself, and the light is actually the product of blooms of microscopic plankton. These tiny little creatures utilize bioluminescence, a defense mechanism that causes them to light up whenever they feel disturbed or threatened, to ward off predators. These waves are filled with creatures, so when this surfer took to the ocean and carved past them, their disco defense mechanisms activated in the millions. Well, that certainly puts a new meaning on surfers riding waves into the blue. Big bubble baths. Now, you should already know this, but seawater is not a liquid made for drinking. The sheer amount of salt, pollutants, and bacteria in it is guaranteed to leave a bad taste in your mouth. And it's this dirty mix that's also responsible for the freaky phenomenon known as sea foam. Along seashores around the world, sea foam is created when the water is especially polluted, usually forming when giant blooms of algae decay offshore. This decaying algae mixes with the seawater, and when the mixture is churned up by the wind and waves, it can create foam. Sea foam can be found on beaches all over the world, and the substance generally forms in small, harmless quantities. But all that can change when a storm rolls in. When polluted seawater is whipped up by extreme weather, it can create huge amounts of sea foam, enough to cover beachfront buildings. This beachfront bombardment took place in Punta del Este, Uruguay, when the city was attacked with a wall of sea foam created by the 120-mile-per-hour winds of the Yaquecan cyclone in 2022. The scenes in Punta del Este were pretty dramatic, but at least the foam stuck to the beach. This footage comes from Tossa de Mar, Spain, when an entire town was filled with foam during 2020's Storm Gloria. It looks devastating, but in both these cases, nobody was injured. In fact, some people actually enjoy it when sea foam starts forming, treating it like some sort of supersized bubble bath. Okay, this looks pretty fun, but it might not be such a good idea. Don't forget, sea foam is created by dead algae and pollutants, and in some cases, it can contain traces of petroleum, detergents, or toxic algae. And this can result in a pretty sickly soak, leaving beachgoers dirty and occasionally irritating their skin. Well, that's one bubble bath I don't want to bathe in. What a spout! Have you heard the song about the itsy bitsy spider? The little bug with a passion for water spouts? Well, it turns out that little guy's pretty hardcore, because in nature, water spouts look like this.
I thought about it for a few seconds, and once I figured out what it was just a question of finding a parking spot.
This type of water spout is a kind of giant vortex that forms on top of a body of water, spinning around like a big wet tornado. The vortex is technically a column of cloud-filled wind that lifts up some of the ocean water as it rapidly rotates. There are two types of waterspouts: tornadic and fair weather. Tornadic waterspouts occur when a tornado from dry land moves over the ocean, or a tornado forms over water. This formation is pretty dangerous, accompanied with high wind speeds, hail, and a large amount of lightning. And as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, water and electricity don't mix well together. These funnels are undeniably frightening. However, most waterspouts are fair weather waterspouts, a less threatening vortex that occurs during calm weather conditions. Fair weather waterspouts typically form in tropical climates, usually in places with warm temperatures. As ocean water evaporates into humid air, it rises into the sky, causing clouds to form above the ocean. This rising air continues to flow into the clouds, creating a very strong updraft. And at this point, if any rotating winds flow through the area, they can get caught around the updraft, creating a vortex that stretches from the ocean up to the clouds. These fairweather waterspouts only last for around 10 minutes, spinning at just under 67 miles per hour. That might seem fast, but when you learn that a light tornado classification starts at 65 miles per hour, it's nothing. These comparatively low wind speeds mean that fair weather waterspouts don't cause any real damage. Despite this, fair weather waterspouts aren't totally harmless. Occasionally, the vortexes can cause a rare phenomenon where it starts to rain, get this, fish. As the waterspout sucks up water, it can suck up whatever's in the water with it, dumping the creatures onto dry land as it loses momentum. So, if you see a waterspout, get your umbrellas ready and your fishing nets. Brine of its own. Now let's move away from the surface and dive underwater to look at a fatal phenomenon that occurs at the bottom of the ocean. At a glance, this underwater formation might look like an icicle, but it's actually a brinicle, a hollow icicle that grows underwater. Okay, but what's so deadly about a brinicle? Well, despite what it looks like, this little sliver of ice is actually a weapon of mass destruction. Eventually, it'll grow down and hit the seabed, and when it does, the water and the earth around it will flash freeze, killing all living organisms in the area with an explosion of ice. Unfortunately, this super unsettling superpower has a scientific explanation, and it all comes back to the way that salt lowers the freezing point of water. Seawater's high salt content means that it can get incredibly cold before freezing solid. However, when the weather conditions get cold enough, the water will start to freeze at the surface, covering the oceans around the Antarctic and the Arctic with sheets of ice. When these oceans start to freeze, all of the impurities and salt are pushed out of the water by the ice. These impurities are pushed down into the water, creating a layer of extra salty fluid, sitting directly underneath the surface of the sheet of ice. Now, extra salty water has two unique properties. One, it has an even lower freezing point than regular salt water, allowing it to become far colder than the water surrounding it. And two, it's far denser than the water surrounding it, and its weight causes it to sink, traveling downwards in a stream towards the seabed. These two unique properties are what cause the brinicle to form, as the extra salty stream heads towards the ocean floor. It's so cold that the water around it starts to flash freeze, surrounding the stream with a glowing tube of ice as it moves. This tube of ice acts as a hose pipe, allowing the extra cold stream to travel down to the seabed in a straight line. When the brinicle finally reaches its destination, the super chilled water hits the ground and spreads across the sand, freezing everything in the area. This kills anything on the ocean floor in its path, and leaves divers like this as floating filling between two slices of ice. Cold, underwater, and claustrophobic? This is literally my idea of hell. Wavy waves. From one deadly water phenomenon to another, let's look at another part of the ocean that you definitely don't want to get caught swimming in: a cross sea, also known aptly as square waves. This pattern of waves is a rare phenomenon where the waves appear to move across each other, forming a constantly advancing watery grid on the ocean. They've been observed all over the world, but the phenomenon only occurs when two separate wave systems collide. This means that they have to be moving in different directions, creating two different sets of waves in the same area. For example, a powerful wind may be pushing one set of waves in one direction, while an ocean swell pushes a different set of waves in another. A cross sea is the point in which these two sets of waves meet. Now, I know swimming into the grid to play the wettest game of tic-tac-toe ever sounds like a ton of fun, but if you ever go for a dip in these waters, you can wave your life goodbye. Square waves are incredibly dangerous because they're practically impossible to escape once you get caught in them. The currents run in different directions from colliding angles, so as soon as you escape one, you'll get sucked into another. Before you know it, you could be pulled far out to sea, forced underwater, or simply left so exhausted you can't swim back to shore, making drowning a very real possibility. All in all, the square waves are pretty cool, but they're definitely best enjoyed from the beach. Mind-blowing bubbles. Now, I think we can all agree that you're never too old to enjoy bubbles. I don't know a single person that doesn't stop and look when they see one. Must pop. But for all the fun shapes they can take in the air, they can take on even wilder forms underwater. This is a vortex ring, a fast-spinning bubble in a ring shape. It's a phenomenon that can occur in a couple of different ways. The first way is through water pressure. When you release a big bubble of air underwater, it starts to float upwards. And this is because bubbles are primarily made of gas, which is less dense than water. As a result, the water below the bubble starts to push upwards with most of the force concentrated to the center of the sphere. If the bubble was formed in deep water, it will be affected by the water pressure in two different ways. As the bubble rises, the water pressure will simultaneously push down on the entire bubble, trying to push it towards the seabed. Sometimes, if the bubble is big enough, these simultaneous forces will cause the bottom of the bubble to rise faster than the top. When this happens, the two separate forces will meet at the center of the bubble, and the sphere will suddenly circle around them, taking on a fast-spinning donut shape. But bubble rings can get even better, because they can also be created by beluga whales. Beluga whales have been observed creating bubble rings in both the wild and in captivity. And the creatures create the special shapes for the same reason we do. For fun! Scientists currently believe that the whales simply blow the bubbles because they're bored, creating the rings to play with. This scientific revelation is as fascinating as it is adorable, showing that humans aren't the only animals that like to watch crazy water phenomena occur. I bet a group of beluga whales would love this video. Antisocial aqua. Now, occasionally, water can refuse to go with the flow. This dramatic-looking phenomenon is called convergence, a situation where two bodies of water meet without mixing, creating a visible barrier between the two. This specific case is the Fraser River plume, a convergence that occurs when the Fraser River flows into the salty water of the Georgia Strait. These bodies of water obviously look very different, but their differences aren't just superficial. The convergence occurs due to the high sediment levels in the Fraser River, as it contains far more dirt than the waters in the Salish Sea. This difference in sediment levels prevents the waters from mixing, and as the Fraser River shoots out into the ocean with force, it cuts through the Salish Sea's waters, causing a stark divide. Convergence can occur between two oceans, too, like where the Baltic Sea and the North Sea meet at Skagen, Denmark. Look, the ocean's waves crash together without mixing at all. These antisocial oceans don't want to mix, and one of them is particularly salty. Literally. The North Sea's water is far saltier than the Baltic's, making it far denser. Again, this difference in density stops the waters from mixing, leaving the oceans divided by a clear border. The effect that convergence creates looks pretty cool, but it would be nice if everybody could just get along. Every body of water, that is. Multicolored lakes. That brown and blue divide caused by convergence was pretty awesome. But next up, we have a divide that's even more spectacular. This cotton candy lagoon is part of Lake McDonnell, a bright pink salt lake in South Australia. Lake McDonnell actually has 3 separate lakes, the area also containing the aptly named Green Lake and Blue Lake. Unsurprisingly, the flamboyant pink lake is the most famous of the 3, and its unique color is caused by a salt-loving algae called Dunaliella salina and a bacteria called halobacteria. Both of these organisms live inside the salty water, and as they move around, they naturally secrete pink pigments, which slowly color the water. This pretty pink lake is pretty amazing, but there are other colorful bodies of water that are more terrifying than cute. An ocean of blood might sound like a story from the Bible, but for former inhabitants of Hormuz Island in Iran, this biblical horror story is a reality. Their island, including its beaches and its semi-evaporated salt plains, are surrounded by crimson waters all year round. Now, luckily, this terrifying tide isn't actually made of blood, and the explanation is far more scientific than horrific. The soil around the coast of Hormuz Island is called galac, a substance full of a mineral called ferrous oxide. The red pigmentation in the ferrous oxide stains the beach's soil and the water around it, the color bleeding into the ocean every time the tide laps the shore. Despite being caused by a colorful metal, I say the waters of Hormuz Island are still bloody creepy. Which fascinating phenomenon did you find the most terrifying, amazing, or unsettling? And have you ever seen any of them with your own eyes? Let me know down in the comments below, and thanks for watching.